Okay, we are coming back for another round of the flipped classroom. The idea here, I'm going to do an idea fashion show, run some ideas by you, see what you think, and you decide if you like it or not. You are free to accept, reject, or adapt anything we talk about. And that's really important because what we're going to talk about today is leadership. And that's a topic that a lot of people know everything about already, apparently. No, it is a topic that is out there. It's not, it's not new to people, but I want to get to the bibno. I want us to try to get to the basic, but not obvious about leadership. I am going to challenge some preconceived notions. That's okay. I just want you to try it out, see what you think. All right. And I'm also going to do this. I am going to do a little timer because I want to respect your time. So I'm going to try to stay within this limit. If I don't, then I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to change the clock a little bit to make it look like I have more time. You'll never notice. All right. So I want to take a step back and talk about organizational development. This is the field from which I come. This is the stuff I study, and this is what it's about. First of all, what I want to say is that human organization is among one of the most important aspects of our survival and thrive. You can even do like a chat GPT conversation. And what are the factors most essential for humans' ability to survive and thrive? What qualities of humans? And it's going to talk about our ability to organize. It's not going to talk about fangs or tusks or any of that stuff. It's going to talk about intellect, bipedalism, opposable thumbs, language, cognitive abilities, and our ability to organize, which I think maybe I can argue. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying I could argue that that would be the central one of from which all these other features kind of develop to support our ability to organize. And then you have to ask yourself, well, then if this is important, I mean, whether it's the most important or second, it's up there, our ability to organize. So it's an important topic. So we have to ask, well, what are the fields of study dedicated to it? And you can touch on things like politics or anthropology. History might touch on organization and certain, how societies were organized. And um, as we get more into the modern era, we're talking about maybe business management. But then it's my field of organizational development. It's not talked about a lot, but it's also not uncommon. You could look it up. Organizational development covers topics like organizational strategy and structure, leadership and management, human capital, talent management, culture, communication, which we talked about last time. Um, and so each of these topics revolve around something I call the through line. I don't think I'll get into it today, but it's very much related to progression theory, which everything I talk about stems from progression theory. So last time we looked at the topic of communication, another topic we're all familiar with, but what I wanted to do is get, kind of go back to the basic but not obvious, and then bring some points to that topic. And that's what I'm going to do with leadership. Okay. So one of the things that's kind of interesting is to ask people what their formative, thoughts were around leadership. Like, when did you first learn of the concept of leadership? When did you first hear it? What were some of the early things that stood out to you? So April and I will ask our high school students that, and they'll talk about, first or second grade, lunch leader, or something like that. For me, growing up, we didn't, leadership was talked about, but not in depth, just mentioned as a word. But I remember one of the formative things in my mind was a leadership lesson in college. A man by the name of Raleigh Stallman was speaking to the student government group, and I hadn't been to leadership trainings or workshops or anything like that before. And Raleigh was an advisor. He was a local banker, a local executive, and he worked with student government. And what he did this. I have to kind of show you. It's a little weird. And I had taken a speech class the semester before, so I'm like, he shouldn't have done this. But he kind of just turns his back like this, like that. He stands there like that. He says, while he's doing that, he says, leadership is standing at the front of the room where anybody could stab you in the back. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's dramatic, but it kind of, but what it did is it raised my thinking about leadership to just this word I heard to, okay, this is something where there's high stakes, you know? And I mean, and literally when you think about going back to ancient Rome, Julius Caesar, things like that, then Raleigh wasn't too far from the truth of what's at stake. But when you think about the centrality of organizations to our life and this topic of organizational development, you have to talk about the topic of leadership. All right. Well, I'm never going to cover all the things I want to cover. So um, I will just say this, though. I was going to do a big thing on this. I could probably spend all my time talking about it. This comes from Martin Seligman, a book he wrote called Authentic Happiness. And he wrote it to describe what was positive psychology. He was calling for a return to the roots of psychology, to not just be about fixing people who are troubled or having challenges and helping them get to a more functional state. But it was also about taking people from a functional state, learning what can we learn about people who live happy, thriving lives and have people live more of that. And that was the positive psychology. And in his book, he describes some of that stuff. I'm just going to take you through it, and we've run out of time. Whatever. You guys can always stop at 15 minutes. I'm going to stop at 15 minutes. All right, whatever. We'll see. All right. So the idea is that where does happiness come from? And his thought was, it doesn't come from any one thing. It comes from an accumulation of things. So it's like each of us have like this little bin of what I call pixels. And every time we have a positive experience, it'll give us a positive emotion. So the premise is that positive emotions are indicators or the results of positive experiences. So it's not just one thing in life that will make you happy. It's an accumulation of these, because just as you can fill up your pixel bin, is what I call it, a bin of pixels, positive pixels, they also empty out every day, so it's a throughput thing. And so what you need is engines of positive emotions. And Seligman describes what those are. He says, positive experiences are when we engage in positive activities that align with our positive personal traits. And what he meant by that is, what are our goals? What are the things we're striving for? What are our values? What are our personality or character strengths? And when we do activities that align with these kinds of things, well, that we're going to say that's a positive activity, and we're going to experience a positive emotion. And that will go into our pixel bin. That's my word. It's not Seligman's. He probably wouldn't come up with a word like it'd be more elegant than that. All right. Now the question begins to come to mind then. If positive activities lead to positive experiences, then what is it that leads to positive activities? And Seligman's observation is that all of our activities happen within the context of institutions. If you think about what you did today, it was within your home, which is an institution, or at school, or at work, or a faith community, or just within your community of, your city, your town is an institution. Governments are institutions. So how do we feel about the activities that we participate within positive institutions? Or are the institutions, are the activities we participate in derived or in within the context of positive institutions? What's a positive institution? Well, it's a place, an institution where they value and develop individuals. They want to see individuals be cultivated and be at their best. And that's as far as Seligman went. But my thing is, I always go to the next level lower. That's the intellection theme from StrengthsFinder, or it could be other themes too. But I'm like, okay, well then what leads to positive institutions? And my background is as a consultant, is as an organizational development graduate student. I even began a PhD in the topic of leadership, but that didn't go well for some reasons. Hopefully, I'm going to get into here about leadership. But it's positive leadership that determines if an institution is positive. It's very difficult for an institution to be positive if the quality of leadership isn't positive. All right, but what is leadership? And that's something that I want to talk about. I have a quote on another slide somewhere which talks about leadership as one of the most widely observed but least understood concepts. Let's see if I have it here. Yeah, here it is. Okay. this quote here really captured my attention when I saw it. This is probably about maybe 15, 20 years ago. James McGregor Burns was a scholar of leadership. And what he said is leadership is one of the most observed and least understood phenomena on earth. It's both. It's observed. We experience it because of how central organizations are to our life, and what we experience within it is we see a lot of leadership, but do we understand it? And he's saying, as an expert, no, which I love when experts are honest like that. They're like, no, I've spent my life looking at this thing and I don't fully understand it. And I'm going to say my piece, at least before we dismount for the day, why I think leadership is misunderstood. And if we have any time after that, great. But it's because I think we've fused together leadership and authority. Like, it's hard to read here, and that's kind of by design. We've fused these two ideas together, and there's some reasons why. Mainly the reason why is we have a certain allergy to authority. We have a certain resistance to it, especially in the United States of America. You know, we rebel against, authoritarianism. And so but when we look at this idea in organizations of how organizations run, well, it is really run by authority, but we don't like calling it that. So leadership is a very similar concept. And so we just have fused it together and we just call it leadership instead of authority. And here's what I mean by how confused this term is, leadership. See, when I started looking at leadership research, studies on leadership, where they're like, okay, we're going to, at an academic way, study leadership and what is it and how is it, exercised and what are the qualities of effectiveness and not. So they have to get subjects in order to do these studies. That's how that works. Now, my concern is when I look at the subjects of these studies, it's not with the research or the findings, although that can come later. But my concern is that when we look at who studied in this research, it's really about, well, look, they say we studied 38 high school principals, or in this study we looked at managers from 26 business units across, with a total of 350 managers, or we studied these sports coaches or these military officers. Or you start to see what I'm saying is when you look at how were people identified to even study leadership, it's that they were in positions of authority. And that's okay as long as we just say that, like, okay, we've studied people in positions of authority and here's what we found. But they don't say that. They just they just automatically assume that the subjects held positions of authority, that makes them leaders. And so that's why I want to delve more deeply into what is this idea of leadership. And I'll just say a few things while I have time, and then we'll run out of time. But the first thing, going back to progression theory, is that what leaders do is they make sure that their organizations not just survive and thrive, but thrive as well. And there's many layers or levels of survival and many, many layers of thriving too. And it's always in flux. But when an organization fails to thrive, I look to leadership. And when it fails to survive, especially so. So then what is it that it's so important? And for me, it's the activity. If we go back to the essence of progression theory, it's about engaging oneself and others and our resources. It's about engaging our resources to get the factors into alignment. So we want to align the factors that are necessary for us, for our community to thrive. And so I define leadership not as a position, not as a personality trait, but as an activity. And because we define it as an activity, that gets us into the realm of being able to get better at it. And this is an activity we want everybody to get better at. We want everybody to be able to move up this ladder. And you might remember from our talk of StrengthsFinder how we move up the ladder. We apply our themes of talent to the activity. We grow our knowledge related to the activity, and we learn the steps of the activity. So for me, we have to first decide what leadership is. And if it's a muddled concept, how can we get good at it? So that, these are some of the things I just want to put on our table to wrestle with. regarding it. So you can even freeze the screen here and just take a look and see how, when I separate out leadership from authority, you could kind of see some of the differences here, right? You can see, gives you a sense of it. And, you might say, wow, that sounds like when I read things about how they distinguish management from authority. And yeah, management from leadership. And that's right. Management is authority. And I don't have a problem with authority or management. I believe these are very important concepts and we should get good at it. And we can't get good at them if we can't even call it authority. We just have to call it leadership. I mean, so how do we get better at it? All right. So what I want to say is, moving up the ladder of the activity of leadership, for me, when I looked at it here, I'm going to stop the timer. It's about to stop, but I'm going to be finishing up here. Anyway. Now, this is kind of my dismount, because then if you want to know more, I could delve more into these 7 things. What I'm saying here is that leaders, their job is to help their communities thrive, survive, of course, and then thrive. And that's their main job. That's how I think of it. And the way to do it, they might come in and think they could do it with the power of personality or whatever, or using authoritarianism. But really what it is, the way to help your communities thrive is by knowing the factors that are necessary for it to thrive, and then getting them into the right state of alignment. And if you align the factors that are necessary for thriving, then thriving will result. And so leaders know to focus on that. And how do we get these factors into alignment? Well, we have to spend our resources. We have time, talent, energy, reputation, budget, technology, experience, all kinds of resources. So how are we engaging them? Are we spending them on the things that we need to align, or are our resources being diffusely spent in things that we don't really know why they're being spent there? Maybe we always did it this way, or, somebody had an idea at one point, or who knows why. And these resources get sputtered and wasted. And so we could reclaim them more towards the activities. And now you know how to do it, as we've talked about. Thriving is a relationship between purpose and outcomes. So start with purpose, then from there identify your outcomes, then learn the factors that are necessary for us to thrive, and then invest your resources into those factors and nowhere else. And this is what leaders getting their communities to do this. Well, this is a challenge. And so I talk about 7 capacities, and this is, I'll just say a few things. We're done. It's 15 minutes-ish. We're all happy, I hope. And then bring your thoughts, bring your questions, bring your challenges to the conversation. But the 7 capacities I talk about, and they're not the only ones, there are others, but I believe that authenticity is essential to this process. We talk about self, and then leadership. And then ultimately, where I want to go even after leadership, is philanthropy, which we don't talk about much, or we talk about in ways that I have concerns about. But authenticity, I have a lot of ways I talk about that. There's many layers to it. Purpose is a capacity to discern purpose, to get your communities to focus on purpose, to align our outcomes to our purpose, to then align our resources to produce the outcomes to fulfill our purpose. That's a capacity that leaders can develop. The capacity to advocate, and this is something that we talked a lot about in our last session, that we are advocates. And it is an aspect of leadership. It's a capacity. Resilience, because when we advocate, well, we open ourselves up to those challenges. Raleigh Stallman, visualized it with the stabbing in the back. We have to be able to bounce back if people don't like our ideas, or we upset somebody, or, we make a mistake even. Leaders require the capacity for resilience, and also the ability to build communities. So not just being the center of attention and insisting on things always run through you, this hub and spoke model, but instead, how do you build a stronger meshing or network or braiding of a community? Reason is the 6th capacity, and it's for me, I speak in terms of being an advocate of reality. So this is a direct callback to communication for alignment. The more aligned you are with reality, and that's what reason is. That's the very definition of reason. It's making sure how the world is represented in your mind is consistent with the world as it really is. That's from the oh, I can't remember which philosopher right now, but this, and then the seventh capacity is gratitude, which isn't just being thankful. Of course, it is that, but it's a recognition that, you know, things were here before I got here that allowed me to build upon it. You know, there's so many resources come into play, but we often see things, you know, by design from our own subjective points of view. And gratitude helps us kind of like, you know, really see beyond just our own subjective perspective. All right, that's a lot. Thank you for the extra time. Let's talk about these or any concepts. If there's anything you want to go deeper on, feel free, mention it. If you want to, you know, have a counterpoint to anything, feel free. All right, see you next time. Thanks.